The consolidation of South Africa's medical scheme industry has accelerated in recent years. Now, according to Genesis Healthcare Consultants, this trend is set to continue as more schemes aim to increase their pool of contributors, sometimes to the detriment of current members. For more, Sunday Jonas earlier spoke to Clayton Samsodien, the Managing Director of Genesis Healthcare Consultants, and began by asking him to explain what is the consolidation of the medical aid industry means for consumers.
Firstly, I think it's very positive, that critical mass, meaning that the more members on the medical scheme would inevitably mean the scheme could negotiate better prices. And that would mean, obviously, a reduction in the contributions to the medical scheme. However, if the consolidation or mergers is taking place for the wrong reasons, the after that, where an ailing medical scheme is simply accepted by another medical scheme, then that causes a range of problems for members of both the medical schemes, and that's what we've seen happen the last 2 years or so.
How can consumers then avoid joining an ailing scheme?
I think financial performance is the key indicator these days. The minimum requirement is for schemes to have a solvency of 25%. So if a scheme doesn't have 25%, then clearly it means it would need to bump up the normal annual increases to reach that 25%. And schemes that don't have the 25% would be looking to join with schemes that have healthy reserves. So, a simple example is you'd find a scheme that has a 15% solvency, and you'd find a scheme with a 37% solvency, and the two would merge, and that would have a negative impact on the members of the healthy scheme, because they now share that solvency scenario, and that is what the members need to look at. I think primarily is what the solvency of the scheme is, the financial performance over the last 3 years. And I think those are the key indicators these days.
You're talking about one scheme merging with another, and on the statement it says any merger will eventually lead to a redesign of the plan options, with the result that members may be forced to migrate to what is called a default option. I wanted you to explain to us what that default option is and what this means for a consumer.
Okay, well, firstly, what is happening in the merge scenario is that you'd find that there could only be a certain amount of options within a medical scheme. Medical schemes, just by virtue of what they offer, would offer 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. So when the schemes merge with one another, it would mean a consolidation of the options offered to the members. Now, certain options are designed for specific members with specific needs. And when it takes place, and I can't mention any names of examples of last year, what we've seen was that certain options were absorbed into another option. Members had to unfortunately find themselves where the network arrangement has ceased to exist, where certain chronic benefits has changed, where the formulary has changed. They unfortunately didn't receive medication that they were accustomed to. And those are some of the salient things that occur when schemes merge. It could even lead to a point where, when the options does merge, it unfortunately causes huge issues for the members insofar as even the contributions are concerned. Income bands can change between two options, and that means they would invariably pay more for lesser benefits, and that's an unfortunate scenario when discriminatory, and we've seen a few examples of that occurring not so long ago.
What recourse then can a consumer take in this instance?
There's not much recourse the consumer can take. I think any consumer needs to start out firstly by establishing what the solvency of the medical scheme is like, what it has been for the last 3 years, what increases have they posted, and that is a good indicator as to how the scheme is performing. And if the medical scheme is not performing well financially, you would find that, they're going to look for a merge partner.
Now, another aspect your statement touched on was healthcare costs. Why are healthcare costs continuing to increase?
Well, firstly, there's the advances in technology, and we have, the practitioner service providers, they need to recover the cost for this technology, and that results in an increase in the tariff charge. And then there's the new drugs. New drugs does improve the treatment, clinical outcomes, but they do cost more because they're patent, and generics are normally although more affordable, it only comes into market at a lesser sort of tariff in a few years' time. Then there's things like the exchange rates, and then the ability of a medical scheme to negotiate better prices for its members. And that's where critical mass comes in. And so, everyone's talking about the philosophy of economies of scale. And that's another driving factor for mergers, because the bigger the size of your healthcare base, the better prices you can negotiate. And the last but not least is the prescribed minimum benefits issue, where medical schemes are required to pay for prescribed minimum benefits in full. That seems to be driving up the cost of healthcare as well. So, in a nutshell, I think those are possibly the 4 reasons as to why healthcare costs are continuing.
And that was Clayton Samsodien, the Managing Director of Genesis Capital Healthcare subsidiary, Genesis Healthcare Consultants, ending that interview with Sisanda Jonas.